Do you ever have tremors? Do you ever notice that you shake?
Yes.
Does that
My
bother
thighs shake a lot, and my fingers shake a lot.
Okay, does that bother you much? The other problem is that they're often not able to supply history.
A little bit.
They often tolerate drug side effects because they've lived with them for 20 or 30 years. And I think they probably just shrug their shoulders and say, this is part of what's wrong with me. Plus, they've been treated for so long, and the development of these things may be so gradual that they don't perceive them. You take a drug, and all of a sudden your head twists like this. You know about it. You say it's the drug, very clearly identified. But you develop Parkinsonism, which develops over days, weeks, or months, and people don't know it. They notice when they have a tremor. So if their hand's going like this, they'll say, oh yeah, I shake, it's from my medicines. But if they're like this, and they move slowly, you know, or their balance is a bit off, they won't recognize that, and frequently their doctors don't either. They all recognize the tremor. But beyond that, they frequently don't identify the other things, the stoop posture, the absence of arm swing, and the bradykinesia. Those often go unrecognized. Now with the right hand, go like this. This fellow has facial masking. Can you hold it sideways now? There you go. He has diminished, he's not much older than me, and that would be normal. Now with the left hand? And the left hand, you can see he's very, very bradykinetic. Okay, put your hands down. Up and down, the whole leg up and down. He's tapping his leg up and down, and he should be able to get a much, much higher amplitude and better speed than he's generating right now. So these are manifestations of his bradykinesia. Careful with your head. I want you to come out in the corridor.
Now, psychiatric patients can be visibly affected by their antipsychotic treatment. And I don't want my patients to look like they're on antipsychotic medications. We talked about your concern about the medicines you were on, that you would look medicated in these interviews. Could you tell me about that? What's the concern about that?
I am afraid that I'm not expressing a full range of emotions, that I look kind of rigid, that I look kind of medicated, and that people can tell that there's something wrong with me, you know, just by observing me.
One of the terrible things about EPS is that it brands you as being on medication.
Well, it's kind of an unemotional quality about it, you know, a lack of animation.
And the meaning of EPS is that they're visibly stigmatized by the side effect.
Right.
Just imagine what compliance to AIDS medication would be if you took a protease inhibitor that gave you some sort of physical side effect that made everyone know that you're on a protease inhibitor for your AIDS. I mean, think about that.
You had an honorable discharge before your psychiatric problems developed.
I had 2 left feet.
You had 2 left feet.
When they made that last parade in front of the generals and admirals, and I wasn't there.
Okay. And you think that was because your psychiatric problems were beginning then?
Yeah, because the marching, I couldn't march.
You couldn't march because of 2 left feet. What does that have to do with any mental illness?
The feet connected to the knee bone. The knee bone connected to the thigh bone.
And that's all connected to your brain. Is that right? I see. Okay.
Tardive dyskinesia is of very serious concern because of the threat to the patient that it can be permanent. All of the other side effects are reversible, but the threat to tardive dyskinesia is its potential irreversibility. The irony is that while on one level it's the most serious, on another level it's one of the least problematic on a day-to-day basis, because tardive dyskinesia for most patients tends to be mild and not distressing, whereas Parkinsonism and akathisia tend to be very distressing.
Keep your mouth open. Okay, that's fine.
I don't have much strength.
Yeah. With the choreic disorders, the constant random kind of movements, patients either are unaware or underestimate how bad their movement disorders are. Whereas patients with tardive dystonia are very much aware of their syndrome. Turn sideways to me. That's right. No, that's perfect. Dorothy has these involuntary movements of her arms, particularly her left arm. But the major problem here was the arm and the axial dystonia, so that she's leaning backwards. Just going by itself, huh? Can you hold your hands out in front of you? Both hands? During this entire time, her psychosis was completely controlled. But they weren't able to find any other medications that could treat her. And she was intolerant of reserpine that induced a severe depression. She was placed on clozapine, which actually did nothing at all for her movement disorder. And the rationale for using clozapine was to allow this passive healing business and also hopefully to treat the tardive dystonia, but it really didn't treat the tardive dystonia. But when we added reserpine, she was able to tolerate it this time, and she became dramatically better. Go like this. So this is, I think, a year or two later. Can you tap your foot? And the other one? The thing to notice is look at her left arm. Look at her posture. Look at her head. Can you sit forward in the chair? Now you will see that she's a little Parkinsonian, but it was a price she was willing to pay because she was so much more comfortable. In other words, she's not normal now, but she's so much closer to normal that even though she's a little bit further in the direction of towards Parkinsonism, I mean, this is dramatic benefit. To the right. This is why people like going to movement disorders. You have the occasional patient who you can improve so much. And this is control. She wasn't cured because 8 years later, she still has this movement disorder, and when her drugs were adjusted, she's got it back again.
Turn around again.
It's like agony. It's just like you're, well, you're shaking all the time. You can't sit down. Then they gave me the shots for my neck and it made it worse. It kept turning more and more. And it's just like, let's say you're walking on hot sand on the beach and you couldn't get to the cool sand. And you're like that for about 20 minutes. By the time you get to the cool sand, you're relieved. Finally, I can breathe. And that's about what it is to get relief from tardive dyskinesia. Because you shake and you can't sit down. It's just complete discomfort.
So what do I do if I see mild tardive dyskinesia on a patient who's on maintenance antipsychotics? The first thing I do is not panic. Some of the biggest disasters I've seen in my practice or as a consultant is mild TD, the patient panics, the doctor panics, the patient goes off medicine, there's a relapse, there's a suicide, or whatever. So the first thing I want to reassure the patient and myself is don't panic.
Now I want to take your right hand and touch each finger with your thumb.
We found that once you develop tardive dyskinesia, it doesn't mean it's going to get worse. It doesn't mean it's going to evolve into some really excruciatingly terrible syndrome, but it may. So you have to worry about each one of these patients that when you see this, that you know in 2 years they're going to be like this or something really bad. But most patients, that doesn't happen. And if you talk, when I've talked to psychiatrists, and I show them videotapes of people like Yosef or people who have other bizarre syndromes, they'll say, I've never seen that. And it's true, they may have treated 500 or 1,000 schizophrenics and they've never seen it. I'm the movement disorder person who sees, you know, the bad ones from the whole catchment area, you know, the whole state, and I see it. And if I show videotapes of some of these patients to other people who are movement disorder people, they won't even take, without a history, they'll say, oh, that's neuroleptic induced. You know, they won't, there's virtually no differential. They, you know, I don't think this is Huntington's disease. They don't think this is stroke. They say, this is from a neuroleptic. I mean, they're very easy to identify. how do you identify those patients early on at the beginning so you know to get them off their bad drug on another drug that's presumably not going to cause it? Nobody knows.